Book discussion, Tai Pan by James Clavell, part 4, and this is the final discussion. I finished the book now. I've had parts 1 to 3 discussing certain parts of the book. Now this is a comprehensive review of the book. And first, I have to say it's a fantastic book. It really touches me very, very closely because I feel like for most of my life, I've been enamored by the idea of the Orient, the Far East, the exploration, discovering China, the clash of cultures between the West and China. These are two of the most, if not the most advanced societies on Earth. One, the Chinese, ancient, older than ours a bit younger, but arguably more advanced, at least technologically. And then this clash, which has been fascinating me ever since I was traveling in my teens, and then definitely in my 20s when I actually moved to Singapore and lived in Shanghai and visited Hong Kong. So this book is about the founding of Hong Kong, the epic story of the beginnings of Hong Kong. But it's a lot more than that. It's also the story of the Tai Pan, the man, Dirk Struan, who directs the largest trading house in the Far East, English trading house, the Noble House, but also is involved in politics, raises kids, families, is in love. It's a story of a man who is larger than life. So I want to talk about 3 things here. It's a big novel. It's an epic novel. There's a lot of things to talk about. So I want to mention 3 things, and then, as I usually do, also have a little bit of a technical comment on the literary side of things. The 3 things I want to talk about is, one is the concept of exploration. Second, the clash of cultures between China and the West. And the third, the importance of the man, the importance of a hero, of a larger-than-life figure, whether it's in 1840 when this story is happening, or whether it's today. We need leadership. We need men. They can be also women, of course, but it's typically men that have that larger-than-life figure and that also encompass strengths that are usually very unique to these types of individuals. And then, like I said, I want to talk about the literary aspects of things. It's not even on podcast. It's December 18, 2025. This is from Delco. For the year, we're up 23.4%. The market is up 16%. We're outperforming by 7.4%. So the novel Tai Pan is about the beginnings of the colony of Hong Kong, embedded also in the story of the Noble House, which is the largest trading house. There's a lot of history here to be covered, and I don't want to go into the details, but it's about the Opium Wars. In principle, the English had an idea of how to trade with China, and that is, the English wanted tea and silk from China. That is something that they wanted. The Chinese only accepted silver against payment. They didn't want to trade with the Brits. In fact, they didn't want anything from the Brits. So even back then, China was obsessed with a positive trade surplus, like today, and they only accepted bullion. They only accepted silver. Well, there's one thing that the Chinese, though, absolutely wanted and were ready to pay for, and that was opium. Now, the emperor does not allow that, but the traders, of course, and the people, the consumers wanted it. So there was this trade, and then the emperor disallowed it. There was a war. The Brits basically forced the Chinese to open up the opium trade so they can give opium and then receive silver and silk. And that's kind of the context in which Hong Kong was founded, because within the context of the Opium Wars that was won by the Brits, they got this rock in the South China Sea, this rock that we call Hong Kong today. So that's the backdrop of the story. But the novel's much deeper than that, and Clavell's an amazing storyteller. He's I think written movies and novels that were made into movies, so he has that gift. Uh, and I want to talk about the concept of exploration. So, what is exploration? I spoke about this already in a previous episode about this book. I think exploration is really what drives humanity. It's exploration that also drives progress, gathering of knowledge, accumulation of know-how, iteration, the necessity to develop knowledge. All these things all come together and are driven by this concept of exploration. I think today we have the same concept, which is the idea of going to space. And we've just recently discovered this new potential idea of having AI data centers in space, which is very, very important because it's an ability to monetize Starship, an ability to monetize the AI chip by Tesla, and most importantly, also the ability to monetize Optimus. So it is a very good example of how exploration drives innovation and monetary profit, which is the ultimate driver. And that is one of the biggest takeaways also of Tai Pan, is that all this exploration, all these ideas, all this, the Brits' engagement in the Far East, in the end, it was all possible because there was money to be made. So the second thing I want to talk about is the clash of cultures between the East and the West. I think Clavell does an amazing job in portraying this clash. It's mainly between Dirk Struan, the Tai Pan, and his mistress, MeiMei. So the clash of cultures is confined in the household of Dirk Struan between MeiMei and the Tai Pan. And I think he does a great job. There's this episode where, for example, MeiMei talks about the Christian religion and the differences between Christianity and the Chinese culture. And the Tai Pan is trying to impose Christianity on her and saying, look, you have to believe in one God. If you want to be with me, you have to believe in one God. And she says, yeah, that's fine. I'll believe in one God. I want to be with you. But what about the Chinese gods? Why should we just throw them away? They're still useful. They could be useful. And it's such a beautiful depiction of the Chinese culture, which is very pragmatic. It is very stubborn, but it's also very flexible. And that's the most important thing that I think anybody who has lived and studied China for a while will, I'm sure, agree with me. China is a very fluid place. You can't pin the culture down. You can't pin the country down. You can't pin the people down on something. They're very fluid people. It's not like anything goes. They have their convictions. They're very clear about what they want. But the way they achieve it, it's more like water. It's exactly like Bruce Lee said, be like water. You can snip their fingers, you can hold up a ship. And MeiMei is exactly that character. She's like water. She slips through fingers. She's very flexible, but she can hold up a ship. She's incredibly strong. And there's another episode where she's pregnant and then gets sick with malaria, and then she hears that Dirk Struan was in the whorehouse. Now, he went to the whorehouse for other reasons. There was some business he had to do, but she thought he went there because he's not getting sex. So she bought a female slave, which in Chinese culture is not as dramatic as it sounds. It's basically a concubine, and that's very common in rich Chinese houses to have concubines. But she buys this perfect girl and chooses her and tells her to go and sleep with Dirk Struan, because she wants to control who's having sex with. So on the one hand, she's very flexible. She's not stubborn like Western culture, which is like you're only going to have sex with one woman. No, she's fine. You can have sex with women, but you're going to have sex with the kind of women that I choose. And Dirk Struan refuses. He says, look, I'm going to have sex on my terms, not on your terms. So there's this really interesting clash. And I think overall, again, most importantly, and this comes through in many ways, is the secrecy, the complexity, and the convolution of Chinese culture that clashes with this very rigid sort of Western culture, which is much more black and white. And I think, again, I've lived in China, I've experienced this, and I can only support this concept. The third thing I want to talk about is the importance of the man, the importance of a leader, the importance of somebody that's greater in life. And I think it really beautifully transcends after Dirk Struan dies, when the typhoon hits the colony, and then his son, who is I kind of portray it as um, you might think at first sight that he's a weakling. You might think so, but then actually he is not. And there's this moment when Aristotle, who is sort of the Joker in the book, he's the artist, crazy person, but also has an important role to play in the book. He opens Column's eyes, says, "Look, you're the Tai Pan. You're you're going to follow the footsteps of your father, and you're not as weak as you think. You stood up to your father when about to know. You married a girl uh, whose father is the biggest enemy of your father. You stood up to her father to protect your father. You're going to become the Tai Pan." And this transition, this like, I got to be larger than life here. I got to take risk. And I've spoken about this already. The modern Tai Pan, which is people like Elon Musk and others like Bezos and, uh, and Jobs, and the modern Tai Pan is, Jensen, the tech entrepreneurs, the big gutsy entrepreneurs that solve deep tech problems, but also take a lot of risk. They're doing what the Tai Pans used to do back in the day, solve very difficult problems. What the Tai Pans had to do in the back of the day is incredibly difficult. First, they had to journey over months from Europe to the Far East, keep their goods safe, deal with malaria, deal with different cultures, deal with wars. They had to solve very, very difficult problems. That's why they became so rich. Because whenever you want to solve a difficult, wealth creation is predicated on applying new concepts and practices, engineering practices or different practices to unseen problems, and that's very difficult to solve. So this importance of a strong man, of a leader, it's still there. It's innate in our humanity. And when we give up on that, like for example in Europe, where after, I guess, 2 world wars, all the alpha males were either died, killed or sent away and emigrated to the U.S. So you're left with this uh, lack of leadership, lack of men who say it the way it is, like all of that, and then you end up in this muddy socialistic kind of wealthy but not progressing state. And that's, in order to progress, in order to, like I said it many times already on this podcast, a society is constrained by its ability to formulate good problems that then can be solved with either artificial intelligence, biological intelligence, doesn't matter, but you need to have good goals. And those good goals, they require man leaders. So last thing, I just want to talk a little bit about the literary side of things. So Clavell is really a sort of mid 20th century writer. So he could be the kind of person that wrote James Bond, right? He's that kind of, like, it's there's depth there. There's definitely some interesting depth, but it's not. This is not high literature. This is not Steinbeck or Hemingway or Maugham. This is a little bit more lighter on that front, but it's still, I think the cultural aspect. Clavell, I think, was born in Australia, so he has, of course, a very good understanding of the Far East, or at least of that part of the world, that side of the world. Or maybe more importantly, he has the ability to look at the world from an outsider's perspective. And that's, by the way, something I really judge about Australians. They are educated in English ways, they talk like us, they look like us, but they grew up on the far side of the world, so they have this ability to see it from the other side. I put myself here, and most people in the United States also, we feel like, because we grew up on this side, and we feel like we're the cradle of the Western society, particularly people in Europe, we sometimes, I think, lack the ability to see it from the other side. And I think Clavell has this really good up, but also see it from our side. I would say some of the techniques that he used, for example, depicting the clash between the East and the West through Dirk and his mistress. I think that's a great idea. I think Colum has a really important role to play as the son of Tai Pan, and the important, like, what does it really take to be Tai Pan? It's not money, it's not connections, it's this magic, this spark, And I think the last piece of the book actually talks about this, and I thought that was really powerful. So overall, I would give it a 5-star rating. This is a phenomenal book. It's a beautiful book. And like I said, it touches my heart. It's something very close to my heart, and I'm very happy. And I can only highly recommend the book. Thank you.